Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Hello, my friends. It's Lynda, and I am here to welcome you back one more time to the Pilates Goddess podcast. I am so excited that you guys continue to come back and listen to the podcast, and I hope to continue to provide you with actionable, useful information on Pilates and other things for a long, long, long time. And today I have a fabulous special guest with me, Matthew Brownstein. Hi, Matthew.
Hey, Lynda. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. So Matthew, if you do not know him, is the CEO of Anahat Education Group and the executive director of the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. Matthew founded the International Association of Interpersonal Hypnotherapists and onlinemonastery.com, where he teaches the Anahat meditation system. He's the author of 5 books, including The Sacred Geometry of Meditation, Sutras on Healing and Enlightenment, and Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. He is both a student and teacher of A Course in Miracles and offers free classes on meditation, hypnotherapy, spiritual growth, and life mastery work through his institute. He is the founder of the Interpersonal NLP Society, Silent Light Publishers, just a few things, and IGE business networking groups. And when he is not working on the vision of Anahat Education Group, which I imagine takes up a lot of your time, he also enjoys hiking, kayaking, yoga, and meditation from his home in the Adirondacks, which we were just talking about before we started recording. And today, we are going to be talking about a lot of things that are of interest, I think, both to Pilates professionals and to the general public. So hi, Matthew. How are you?
Hey, Lynda. I'm doing great. Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit, first of all, about kind of just the online environment, because obviously with the work you do in hypnotherapy and different things, that's normally work that you would be doing in person, yes?
Yes. So we found, especially during COVID, that we had to adapt. And while my private practice for the first 10 years of my work before I opened the Institute, it was all 100% in the office. And I would have said, no, you can't do this kind of work online. But we got approved by the Department of Education during 2020 when COVID hit to start. Actually, it was till 2021. We held off for a while. We're like, no, we're not going to teach this online. Then once we got licensed to do so, we started beta testing it more and more. And the truth is, students are doing better. They're able to interact just as well. In hypnotherapy, we really don't have to touch each other. So you're just as close, when it even seems closer in some ways when you're on Zoom. And yeah, we're able to do the work without any issue. Students are graduating better, and they have the freedom to be able to work from home. They can work from anywhere in the world, and they can make their own schedule whenever they want to. You don't have to get caught up in traffic. So the online medium has been great for our profession.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about this just yesterday, that, we forget sometimes as practitioners the amount of time it takes our clients to actually get to us physically.
Yeah.
So, here in New York, you might have Ubers getting stuck in traffic. You might have the cab that doesn't come. You might have the subway that gets stuck in the tunnel. And suddenly it's taking somebody, a half an hour to an hour just to get to the appointment. And then they're facing the same thing on the other side. So suddenly that 45 or 55 minute session in the studio really for them is a chunk of, 2 hours to 3 hours out of their day. And now my client this morning was a few minutes late. And she literally said, just give me 5 minutes. I just need to just set up my mat and set up my space, and then I'll be with you. Because it wasn't a matter of leaving the house late and then missing the train and then, not getting to where she needed to be. And are you finding that for your clients, in addition to the practitioners, that client outcomes are just as good?
They really are. Yes, I don't see that many clients these days at the level of my career now. We mostly work to get all the clients to our graduates and our senior staff. Yet, generally, because I do have so many people connect to the association, I get a lot of feedback about what online work is like. And it's been perfectly good. Like you said, it's easier for the client, it's easier for us. Right? You don't have to spend a half hour driving into your office, a half hour driving home, and setting up your office. Yeah. So a lot of our graduates are still working out of offices, but a lot of them honestly have had COVID as well. So it is safer to work online. It's better for the environment to work online. And we don't notice any lack of efficacy by bringing the profession online. I see one or two clients a week, and I still get the same radiant testimonials that I've gotten in the past. And again, maybe even better. Hard to say, but certainly not worse.
Great. And I have found the exact same thing with Pilates.
Hmm.
Obviously, with Pilates, your office setup is actually huge. If you're not renting space in another studio, and like here in New York City, if you're going to rent space in another studio, you're paying between $30 and $40 an hour,
Hmm.
to rent space. Um, but obviously, if you decide to do your own, storefront retail location in Tribeca, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 a month in rent,
Hmm.
plus licensing, plus, probably 5 to 6 figures worth of apparatus. And so what I found was that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of teachers had naysayed and poo-pooed the homework
Hmm.
and the mat work and the things that you could do without the equipment, because obviously you want to make your money back. And all of a sudden they were like, I've told my clients for the last 5 years that mat isn't as good as equipment. Now,
Hmm.
what do I do? Because now I want to encourage them to continue working with me and do mat at home.
Hmm.
But I've spent a lot of time telling them that that couldn't be done and couldn't be done well.
Hmm.
I, on the other hand, have found that my clients are thriving
Hmm.
and enjoying that extra time, and that we can mimic spring work in many, many ways. That's why there
Hmm.
are TheraBands and tubes and things that, Joseph Pilates didn't have because he was, working between the wars when they weren't using latex rubber for exercise equipment because they had better things to do with it. Now, this kind of brings me into the issue of educational standards, right? And you and I have chatted about this before, that that it is difficult in a way to maintain the educational standards of teachers, sometimes when you're not with them physically. It's not impossible, obviously. Now, I know you have gone through the whole process of receiving state licensure, yes?
Yes. Hmm.
And how was that? And how is that going?
Yeah. Well, it's challenging. All the excuse me, all the standards that we work to meet are challenging. Like hours and hours per week, just behind the scenes. Not even based on just the curriculum, but on making sure that we are a premier educational institute. So it's hard work, but to me, my profession, hypnotherapy, is something I'm so passionate about that I realized when I got into this, my background is in Chinese medicine. So I went through two different Chinese medical schools. This is master degree level training. You're training to be a doctor, even though it's in Chinese medicine. But those standards, when I went into hypnotherapy, I realized, whoa, those standards really aren't there. So we made our institute with a tagline, raising the standards of hypnotherapy education. And that's been a huge part of what we do, to require that anybody associated with us, any training we do, that it is backed by the Department of Education, so that you have a highly respectable organization monitoring you instead of just putting up a shingle teaching something but not having the Department of Education behind, backing the diplomas that you give.
Right. Now, which kind of brings me to another giant can of worms, which is the number of programs that are available online right now that are purporting to teach neurolinguistic programming, that are purporting to teach hypnotherapy, that are purporting to teach kind of all of these little things. And they're not little things, but they're packaging them together as if they were just kind of little things here and there. That then, they're going to train coaches to basically, cajole clients
Mm. Hmm.
into buying, which really seems to me to be completely inappropriate, and just not really in the realm of what your work is supposed to be about.
Yeah, well, there's certain things like the word hypnosis or NLP coaching. But let's take like the word forgiveness, for instance. Could somebody like you're talking about teach forgiveness? Oh, absolutely. So I don't find a problem with anybody teaching on these topics. The issue is in hypnotherapy, it's a federally acknowledged occupation. So to use the occupational title hypnotherapist is one thing, but when you're training someone in that, it would be like the equivalent of training someone to be a medical doctor or a nurse without being licensed to do so. So, could you imagine going and getting your nursing degree and you find out, well, I'm not actually a nurse? So, if you go through trainings like you're talking about, sure, you could learn some hypnosis, some NLP. It's good stuff. Like we should be teaching it. Yet, those trainings need to be really clear. You're not state licensed, you're not accredited, your diplomas aren't legitimate, you probably don't have enough hours of training. And then somebody who's doing that type of training, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they should be willing to refer to an organization that has much higher standards if somebody wants to go a lot further. So we'll find people who go to like 40 or 50 hours of hypnosis training, and that's fine. They got their feet wet, but you can't be a career professional with 40 hours of training, right? So we offer a minimum of 500 to get through our entire training. Yet with us, if you do everything we offer, you're talking about 1,500 hours of training. So you can't just say, well, I'm trained in hypnosis 40 hours versus I'm trained in hypnosis 1,500 hours. So we honor this as a legitimate profession, as the federal government does, and as the majority of the states do. And then we just train people at that level. But, we teach forgiveness. So as an example, so someone else can teach forgiveness, but if you package it within the realm of a profession, that's where you're misleading the public. And technically, it's illegal to train someone in a profession without being licensed to do so. Just like, again, saying, you're a chiropractor because you sat in my living room and I taught you chiropractic techniques for a weekend, right? That would be unethical and illegal. And the same actually should be true of hypnotherapy, but the truth is nobody's really monitoring that. So all we can do is kind of forget about the other people doing what I would call potentially substandard training. But all we can do is just keep our standards high and just keep letting the public know what those standards are.
Yeah, I think I had mentioned to you in our last conversation what kind of the challenges that we've had in the Pilates community around licensing and training. And it's sort of an interesting space because, because we're dealing with a body of work that was created by an individual human, Joseph Pilates. And the people he trained, of course, and his wife and other folks added different techniques and different things to kind of make it their own when they opened their own studios and kind of moved around. But I'm seeing kind of similar themes in our industry. I'm doing a search right now to find a comprehensively trained teacher for a studio in the Caribbean. And I am consistently inundated with CVs of folks who clearly thought that they had taken a comprehensive Pilates certification, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see the paper, I can tell they didn't. They have, only Madden Reformer, or they've taken there are very brand specific trainings now
Mm-hmm.
where they just teach you kind of the exercises and the modalities that they want you to use within their space and their franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that it's full system, but it's not.
Mhm.
Because they add things in and they take things out, and maybe you're getting ready to teach a class of 15 people on a regular basis, so there are certain exercises that they don't even put in the training
Mhm.
because they know that it would be bad to try to teach them to 15 people at the same time on a
Uh-huh.
piece of equipment. And I feel bad, honestly, for these teachers, because they clearly were told or were led to believe, very open ended, that they were receiving a training that would allow them to work anywhere,
Mhm. Yes.
and do this. And it's the same thing. I'm looking for a, 4 to 600 hour training. I'm looking for something that took at least 6 months to a year to complete.
Mhm.
And I'm looking for, do you know everything? Whether you teach it all or not, I don't care.
Mhm.
I just need to know you know it. So, I think that what you've done is very interesting, because oftentimes what I'll say to Pilates teachers is just stay in your lane,
Mhm.
kind of ignore what the competition and the naysayers are doing, and strengthen what you're doing as much as possible to serve yourself and your clients, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's been my model is don't focus on other people, just do what you do really well and do what you do with best practices to the best of your ability. So, yeah, if you have a mission and a purpose, then do your mission and purpose, and there are going to be people drawn to you that you can help. But yeah, if you're concerned about high standards, at least in these type of professions, it's really up to us to set the bar and then to keep raising the bar higher. And just keep educating the public like we're doing now, that low standards only ruin our professions. They don't make them better.
Hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit about mind body healing and just the mind body connection. Joseph Pilates is actually very, very famous for saying that the mind and the body need to be connected. That it's very important to be very intentional about what you're doing. And a lot of folks don't like that kind of controlled aspect of Pilates all the time. But he was like, we need to be able to coordinate the parts through the central nervous system and the spine, and move intentionally from there in varying planes of motion. And he actually felt that in doing that, that if you could kind of keep your brain focused on that would be almost a little bit of a meditative state,
Mhm.
as you're exercising and during doing the work. And mind you, he created a huge chunk of the work when he was interned as an enemy alien by the British during the First World War as a German national. And the British held them until Germany made its first reparations payment, which was a good solid more than a year after the war ended, because they weren't doing that well financially at that point. And he basically kept people sane and together,
Mhm.
through doing this kind of work. But what I see now happening, even in physical Pilates studios, is people come in, they're extraordinarily scattered. We're more scattered now even than we were, I think, pre-pandemic. There's so much kind of pulling at our attention. You have people getting on the reformer and they're still checking their phones, or worse, their iWatches
Mhm.
or their smart devices. Like I can say, put your phone down, and people are still getting text messages on their wristwatch at this
Mhm.
point. It's kind of like this ongoing just inundation of data and stuff. And I know that you do a lot of work with meditation
Mhm.
teaching, with Course in Miracles, and different mind body techniques. So, talk to me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I like how you began. I'm going to segue with when you said the mind and body should be connected. And I would acknowledge they are connected, right? We
They are.
can't not have them connected, right? So by honoring that there is a mind body connection, even though we might be in our heads, we might think that we're just the ghost in the machine and that the ghost in the machine doesn't affect the machine. We now understand it's not a machine, right? And that you're not just a ghost, that you are a very powerful, influential being on your physiology. So when, like you were talking about, when people are scattered, their mind is all over the place, they might come into a Pilates studio to work on their body, but how much of what they're struggling with in their body is because of their mind, right? So if we live with stress, which is really a lot of hurt and sadness and fear and anger and guilt and shame, people carry that all the time. The effect that has on the physiology is significant, even though I don't believe it's acknowledged enough. So I'm not really familiar with Pilates, but I can say if somebody comes in just to work on their body, it's just not holistic, right? So our work has been to approach it from the spiritual, mental, emotional side, where it makes changes in the energy body. Because again, my background is Chinese medicine. But if you start on those more subtle levels, which are more causative levels, you start to notice a change in the effect in behaviors, in physiology, and just overall performance for anybody when they are more spiritually, mentally, emotionally connected. Right? So honoring that model of wholeness, that mind and body are connected, yet anything we would do in a caregiving profession needs to focus on the mind, or it's missing probably the most important part of who you are.
Oh, definitely. And I sometimes, since I started meditating regularly a couple of years ago, I feel like it calms my brain down.
Sure.
If I don't do it in the
Mm-hmm.
my day is not the same. My
Mm-hmm.
brain doesn't feel calibrated
Right.
quite correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost just like turning the computer off and turning it back on and just getting that reset for me. So can you talk a little bit about what's actually happening within the brain and the energy body when we slow down and engage in some focused kind of spiritual practice, or, meditative practice that maybe we're separating from spiritual, but they're probably all connected?
Yeah, there are definitely studies done in the efficacy of hypnosis, and something like the Heart Math Institute is doing amazing work on what's happening in the brain, mind, heart, mind, body connection. Personally, I don't focus a lot on the physiology because when we meditate, there's a subjective experience regardless of what's happening with serotonin or dopamine levels, right? No, there are mind machines now where you can put these devices on your head and map what brainwave state are you in, and a lot of that can be really helpful. I just like the subjective experience of, are you at peace or not? Right. So when you close your eyes, what is your internal, excuse me, what is your internal world like? Is inside of you peaceful, blissful, loving, sweet, wonderful? Like, do you love your insides? Well, when you close your eyes, you want to be in touch with who you really are? Or are you terrified of yourself? Do you hate yourself? Is there all this self loathing and shame and guilt? It doesn't really matter to me about the physiology or the science is behind that. Because when I sit down with a client, I'm not going to say, so where are your serotonin levels at today? I'm just going to say, how do you feel? And when they say, oh, I'm sad, I can go right into that. So techniques like meditation or really good hypnotherapy that can make major shifts in the heart, subconscious, mind, emotional space have major effects on the physiology. And we can measure those, but that's not really what we do right when we wake up in the morning and we sit down on the cushion to meditate. It's really about checking in, scanning your body. How does my body feel now? Checking with your emotions. How do you feel emotionally? How is your mind? What's going on in your head with all of that? And then realizing we can get that to a state of perfect peace. Peace, in A Course in Miracles, peace is health. So I don't know what's happening in the physiology for each individual when they're in a state of peace, but I do know every human being has the ability to attain that state of peace, and that could only benefit our physiology.
Yes. Yeah. And that's so, I think, powerful and empowering for for folks to know that I used to, okay, so just backing up a little bit, just a tiny bit of my history is that I grew up with a bipolar mother and a depressed father. Um, and I'm adopted and kind of happy about that, just given the genetic, connections there. And so all I learned growing up were very dysfunctional behaviors when it came to things like stress or any kind of discomfort anywhere or lack of health anywhere. And for decades of my life, I would kind of act out in these ways, right? Like I would just wake up and be like, oh, the coffee didn't go well today and the toast didn't go well today. So I'm just having a bad day. And then everybody around me would reap the repercussions of Lynda having her bad day. And it's interesting now that I've been doing more of the introspective work over the past few years. And, I'm a Reiki master for a good 10, 15 years, where now I kind of get up and I'm like, oh, okay, forgot to grind the coffee yesterday. It's fine. I'll grind it in 20 minutes. Not a big deal, And I'm able now to kind of make that differentiation for myself of things around me could not be great, but that doesn't mean I have to be having a crappy day.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Whereas I grew up believing that if everything around you was kind of not going well, then it was okay to act out on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like during probably the last 6 years in the US, we've seen more acting out, kind of publicly, whether on both sides of the aisle, politically, the way people are behaving in the world. We're just seeing a lot of this, oh, well, it is what it is, and I'm angry today, and this is what it's going to be like. And does that really kind of show a lack of introspection and spiritual growth, or is it more that we've gone through such a huge shift due to the pandemic and due to this whole different way that we have to look at the world, that old stuff is kind of coming up and people are acting out on it and don't know how?
Yeah, I honestly don't know if it's the same, better, or worse. I don't know how many years, like you said, like 6 years getting worse. I personally don't know, but I do know there's an opportunity to teach what we're talking about. So one of my books is called Peace Under All Circumstances, and it really teaches that no matter what's happening in the external world, you can be at peace. So when we're reacting, or you talk about acting out, we're essentially having our buttons pushed, right? Or, things are happening and they're challenging, like pandemics and hurricanes, and we get emotional about this. But nobody teaches us what to do with our emotions. And I like to think that's getting better with YouTube and whatnot. So I really don't know. But I just know there is a core teaching that most people are not introduced to, which I put in the category of opening the heart teachings. And the first step there is don't suppress your emotions. Stop bottling stuff up. If you bury it inside of you, you're going to end up with major problems later. So then when people hear, oh, okay, well, I know I'm not supposed to suppress. So then as you talk about, we'll start expressing, we'll start acting out, right? If I'm angry, I won't push it down inside of my heart anymore. I'm going to let it out. But when we let it out, we are essentially polluting our world with all of our mental, emotional toxins. We're ruining our relationships. And the truth is, we never get the anger out of our heart, right? When you let your anger is an example, but any emotion can be applied here. When you let your anger out, and then you say, if I'm mad at you and I tell you how I feel, if you do the same thing again next week, am I more mad or less mad? I'm more mad because I told you, I yelled at you. I said, don't you ever do that again. And you did it again. What that shows us is by suppressing my emotions, I don't get rid of them. And by venting them, I don't get rid of them. It's not saying we shouldn't have emotions, but we don't know what to do with them. And so the real teaching there, in short, is A feeling is meant to be felt. It's not necessarily something that's meant to run our life. In the hypnotherapy model, we work with what we call the inner child. And if you let your emotions run the show, you're essentially letting your inner child run the show. That's the emotional part of you. For most people, the inner child is about 5 to 10 years old, on average. So what if you have a 7-year-old, an angry 7-year-old running your life? Expressing our emotions doesn't help the world, and it doesn't help us. So once we learn how to be with our heart, with the subconscious, with that inner child part of us, we can learn to have a relationship with it, right? We can feel what it's feeling. Like if you have a child who's upset, you don't just let them go out and rant and rave around town, nor do you lock them in a closet. You sit down and say, how are you feeling? What's going on? Tell me how you feel. First, you validate someone. Then you essentially say, how can I help you to feel better? But when you're just dealing with raw emotion, my experience as a meditator is the best thing to do is just sit still. If you don't move and you just sit and feel your feelings, it starts getting very uncomfortable inside. It gets hot inside. It's like, oh, you want to do something to make it better. But if you don't do anything about it, if all you do is sit there and breathe and relax your body and just feel your feelings, they tend to burn themselves away. When they do burn themselves away, you have a whole new perspective on things. Like, all right, I was angry at that person. Let me sit and be with the anger until it dissolves itself. And in that motion, if you learn about forgiveness, like, I'm going to forgive and let go. I'm just going to keep letting go. Once we return to clarity, we realize, oh, there's a healthy, responsible, mature way to act. So we get better behaviors out of this simple process of just sitting with our feelings and letting them transform. But the real reward is the feeling is transformed. So it's a relatively complicated teaching. So anybody who's interested on YouTube, you can just Google Matthew Brownstein, Opening the Heart. And I give plenty of these lectures about how you burn away your emotional blocks. There's only a limited number of emotional blocks, but the light, the joy, the peace, the love, the bliss, the ecstasy that is inside of all of us is available. Every time you clear a block, you get more love. Every time you clear a block, there's more light. Clear another block, there's more peace. The goal is to clean house so you don't have any more of these blockages. You don't have any more buttons that people can push. That's really the path of spiritual growth. It's usually like 10 years of intense growth to clear all these blocks. But the reward of getting emotionally free is absolutely worth it. And yeah, most people just aren't trained in this type of thing.
I know. For much of my life, I was extremely reactive and felt like I always had to react to things like immediately.
Mhm.
Like, this thing came. What's that? I got to deal with this right now. And, I had an incident this morning with a colleague who I work with, who I know has that same kind of trigger, And we were, texting about something, a business thing that we're both working on. And she called me, and I elected to not take the call. I just didn't. I haven't even listened to the voicemail yet. And I don't even know if I will, because I know it's just an angry voicemail. Like, I know what it is. And I know if she sits with it for a day, she's going to be fine and come back to me in a different way. But it was very interesting for me to do that, because this is actually a person who I didn't speak to for a solid decade because of this kind of behavior. But now I find that just through doing this, the kind of work you're talking about, that now I'm able to, in a way, kind of separate her from the behavior.
Yeah, good.
And say, this is what she does. This is a thing. I just texted back and said, please do not lash out at me when you're angry. Wait 24 hours.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And we will continue our discussions.
Mm.
But yes, I feel like the kind of work you're talking about is so important for those of us, say, Pilates and exercise professionals who are generally dealing a lot with people in pain. A lot of people come to Pilates because they've got back pain, they've got neck pain, they've got joint replacements, they've got arthritis, they've got issues and injuries that they're dealing with, that they really want to try to have less physical pain, enjoy more freedom in their lives. And I feel like, as practitioners, if we are better able to sort of be calm and centered in ourselves so that we can project that and that sort of solidity to our clients,
Hmm.
that everybody's going to be better for it.
Yeah, well, I hear, yeah, if the practitioner is a good space, it can help the client so much better. Uh, yeah, a lot of my work deals with the idea of the healed healer, is helping the practitioner to be in an excellent state. Because in my work, when somebody comes in with pain, because I don't work in the body level, I work in the mental level, because I've done so much work in myself, I know how to be pain free. I know how to take great care of my body. I'm almost 50 years old now. I don't have any aches or pains, like any issues in my body. It's been from a lot of yoga, meditation, Tai Chi. But I know not a lot of our clients are, coming in with all those skill sets. But like I've kind of been saying, they do come in with all the hurt and sadness and fear and anger and all these memories from the past that are really disturbing them. So what I found is a lot of pain is really just the mind expressing itself in the body. And by being whole within myself, I end up serving as a role model for my client to say, okay, I hear that you're in pain, yet I can do a simple hypnotic technique and show you I can make that pain go away, at least temporarily. I can reduce almost any pain within minutes, usually to where they're not feeling it anymore. But, that's not always safe. And we work in coordination with doctors to be sure it's okay to remove the pain. But it would be still unsafe in the sense that the pain is trying to tell you something is wrong. Like, one, maybe there's something physically wrong. But two, what if there's a deeper mental emotional theme going on? And if we don't address that, we're robbing the client of a chance for tremendous personal growth. So when I was in Chinese medical college, if someone came in with pain in their shoulder, we would do massage or acupuncture, maybe herbal, use different herbs. But in hypnotherapy, we could regress this person to the root cause of where that pain is coming from. And quite often, there are memories bottled up in that region of the body. There are negative emotions. There's negative belief systems. All the tension we hold, like when you go to a chiropractor and your spine is out of alignment, they might realign your spine. But then they realize, oh, well, the muscle tension is pulling the spine out of whack. So now we bring in massage therapists into chiropractic offices to loosen up the muscles. But then you ask the massage therapist, well, why is that muscle so knotted up in the first place? They say, oh, well, it's an energy block. But massage therapists know if you push on that energy block on that muscle enough, emotions start pouring out of there, right? So what is all the tension in the muscles? Mostly fear, right? So if we just think that a thing is a thing rather than a thing is a thing because it was a thought first, right? So we learn to translate things into thoughts. The thing called spinal misalignment is really, in this case, just muscle tension. But the massage therapist can only deal with the muscular, maybe the energetic level. So you're a Reiki master. So we say, all right, let's bring in the Reiki masters. The Reiki practitioners can put their hands there and heal the energy. But once you realize the energy is actually a motion that's not moving, right? Emotion, energy in motion. But that energy was blocked, number one, again, because we suppress our feelings. So then you realize, oh, well, this is mental, right? So then you say, okay, well, now psychotherapy, like let's bring in psychotherapists. Like chiropractors should be working with psychotherapists. But then if you're only doing talk therapy for like an hour a week, are you really clearing those blockages in the way that you could? So what I found, so I went through all of these, like I'm trained in Reiki and acupuncture, Chinese medicine. I was trained in all of it, but I kept realizing the mind, it's the mind, it's the mind. Like it just all comes back to mind. So yeah, talking about wholeness, when the practitioner is whole, it's really quite easy to see where the client is blocked. And my experience of wholeness is we have to honor the spiritual, the mental, emotional, and the physical. In Chinese medicine, they say the lesser level physician heals on the physical level. The mid-level physician heals on the energy level. The highest level physician heals on the spirit mind level. When I heard that in Chinese medical college, it was one of the blows to my moving into that career. Is I learned Reiki in college. I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this knowledge? This is good stuff, using energy. Even hypnotherapy in mesmerism with Franz Anton Mesmer, he was supposedly using magnets to heal people, But one day he forgot his magnets and just used his hands. And he was like, oh, the power's in me. It's not in the magnets at all. But then as they studied Mesmer, they said, he's not healing through the power of energy. He's healing through the power of suggestion, belief, and imagination. And that was the big nail in the coffin for mesmerism, was there. The scientific and medical delegation at the time that studied Mesmer said there is no magnetic fluid. There's no energy transfer. I think people like you and me might say, no, there is energy transfer, right? You can't be a Reiki practitioner and say, there's no energy. However, what they realized in the early days of the mesmeric hypnotic movement, the mind is capable of healing all of this, because all the healings that Mesmer was doing, we attributed to mind, not to animal magnetism or energy. So again, like my path has been all roads lead back to the mind. But it doesn't mean we don't do Pilates or chiropractic or massage. But if we don't honor the mental level, we're missing, and except for your very own soul, you're missing the core of a human being, right? Like how much time, if you said, who are you? Most people don't identify with their bodies. They tell you their thoughts, right?
Right.
Like I'm a thinker in my head. It's not who you really are, but we identify with our conscious minds and with our emotional selves. To not honor that in some type of holistic approach to healing misses the majority of who we really are.
Yeah, I fully agree, which is, kind of interesting for me because I do the physical training and I do that. Then again, I was a philosophy professor back in the
Mhm.
day. Matthew, this has been an illuminating discussion. Seriously. Um, and I know that you offer free meditation trainings at onlinemonastery.com. So people can find you there. And where else can people find you if they wish to reach out, maybe find some of your practitioners,
Mhm.
or contact you directly?
Yeah, sure. So onlinemonastery.com is a great resource for totally free, very deep meditation training. Good for beginners, but anybody who wants to go very deep in an advanced system, absolutely. The main place to reach me, though, is instituteofhypnotherapy.com. That's where students can get access to free hypnotherapy training to get started, tons of free classes that we offer online. And then, yes, if somebody's looking for a hypnotherapist, I don't see many clients anymore. We usually just refer out to our high-level graduates and staff. But yeah, you can contact us through any contact form or email on the Institute of Hypnotherapy.com website.
Wonderful. And of course, I will have all of the links to all of your social media and your website and onlinemonastery.com in the show notes for the show. So they'll be available everywhere. So you guys, if you're interested in getting in touch with Matthew, and I highly suggest that you do this, just go into the show notes wherever it is you're listening to your podcasts, and all of the links will be there. So thank you so much for joining us, Matthew. It was really an illuminating discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Lynda. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Oh, so everybody, thanks again so much for showing up for the Pilates Goddess podcast. I really hope you enjoyed today's interview. And of course, I'm going to ask you again, if you enjoyed the podcast, please go over to Spotify or the Apple Podcasts app and leave a rating and a written review. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.